So, the leaks for Chapter 15 of Boruto's 2 Blue Vortex are out. And man, is this chapter packed with action, answered questions, and cliffhangers. See, this chapter is the perfect racemic mix of answering lingering questions while setting up new questions that'll be answered somewhere down the line, while at the same time proving some of our theories to be correct and some of our other theories to be incorrect. See, because in this chapter, we got everything from the reveal of how Gaara and Shinki ran across the claw grimes, the truth about Gaara's situation, how the hidden sand is dealing with the presence of the Shinju and the claw grimes, a possible reveal, but at the very least definitely exposition about how the Shinju are created. We finally got to see Code fully interact with the Shinju, and boy oh boy did it not go well for Code. And then last but not least, we got the reuniting of Kawaki and Boruto, where not only a team-up was promised between the two of them, but it was revealed that Amado has been scheming with Kawaki's life. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the month when Boruto comes out. And like with every other month for the last year and a half, this chapter is heat, cover to cover, which means that we have a lot to talk about. So why hesitate any longer? Let's get our fingers into the meat of this chapter, because today we're talking Chapter 15 of 2 Blue Vortex Explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous, go ahead and follow my other YouTube channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything happening in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But before we get into all that, today we're going to talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Marvel Strike Force. Marvel Strike Force is a free mobile squad RPG that allows you to compile a team of your favorite Marvel superheroes and supervillains, yeah, they can coexist, in a fight to save the universe against threats like Doctor Doom and Apocalypse. You can power up your favorite fighters by completing missions, which can also give you gear and resources, and if you're sick of beating up on the computers, you can play some PvP modes, such as Alliance Wars and Arena. And there's so many characters to choose from that truly every team is unique. Whether you're trying to recruit heroes, villains, or a combo, a new player can unlock up to 17 characters within the first 30 days of playing, including Spider-Man, Deadpool, Thor, Captain America, and so many more favorites from Marvel. And you can take these teams into so many different game modes, like the campaign, arena, and blitz. But it doesn't end there, as there's also game modes like Alliance War, which is a massive weekly battle. There's also raids and Cosmic Crucible, which pits you head-to-head against other players in a massive tournament. My personal favorite feature out of all of this is the Alliance feature, which allows me to team up with my friends to complete things like raids, ensuring that I get those sweet, sweet rewards at the end. But you gotta synergize with more than just your friends, as team composition and synergy is one of the things that makes Marvel Strike Force truly unique. So you can't just throw a bunch of randoms on a team and expect it to work. No. That's where team synergy comes into play. See, characters in Marvel Strike Force often possess unique abilities that buff their teammates, and those buffs usually work together if they come from the same faction, like the Avengers or the X-Men. And trying to find the most ideal and strategic way to set up your team adds another layer of complexity and fun to this already incredible game, as you try to identify your own personal meta as you build a well-balanced team. But new characters are constantly being released every single month in Marvel Strike Force. So what are you guys waiting for? Use the link in my description or scan the QR code on screen right now to download Marvel Strike Force and unlock characters like Agatha Harkness this month. So go ahead and use my link or the QR code on screen. So, Chapter 15 of 2 Blue Vortex doesn't necessarily start off where Chapter 14 left off, but narratively wise it does. See, because the last thing that we saw in Chapter 14 of 2 Blue Vortex was the reveal of Ryu, also known as Shinki's Shinju. And thus narratively, at the beginning of Chapter 15, we do pick up on the continuation of the story of how Shinki's Shinju came into being. But to tell that story, we have to take a step into the past. And thus in the first page of this chapter, we step into the Land of Wind, where we see A, the ceiling of an Orochimaru hideout, and B, Shinki and his Kankuro and Tamari copies are encased in giant sand eggs. And Shinki is not happy about being encased in this giant sand egg. And like, honestly, man, I get it. I probably wouldn't be too happy about it either. I never loved getting buried at the beach. But Shinki proceeds to yell, "What is the meaning of this, father? Please release the sand. We will fight too. And it's at this point that we see a drastically injured Gaara holding on to his abdomen. It's at this point that it's revealed that Gaara has wrapped up the New Age Sand siblings in his sand to try to fly them out of a battle. See, because Gaara, in response to Shinki telling him to let him fight, says, "It's no good. I'll carry you to the entrance like this. Run. This is an order from the Kazekage, okay?" Now this elicits another scream out of Shinki as he yells, "Father!" at the top of his lungs. And it's at this point that it's revealed just who Gaara has been fighting against. And it is the Moegi Shinju. Because as she strides into scene, lording over the borderline fatally injured Gaara, I've been trying to tell you guys, I merely came here because I was following traces of chakra left behind by Boruto and his ally, Kashin Koji. But so far as I can tell from these leaks, which mind you are not greatly translated, the Shinju don't seem to know Kashin Koji's name, or even really who Kashin Koji is. They just know who Boruto is, and because Juro wants Boruto dead, every single one of the Shinju are trying to find Boruto. Now the Moegi Shinju goes on to say, "I don't care about you guys," which is very in line with everything that we've seen from the Shinju up until this point. The Shinju have a goal in mind. Anybody who gets in the way of that goal can get cut down, but not because they want to do it. Now, presumably, how all of this came to pass is that the Moegi Shinju flew into the Land of Wind trying to find Boruto and Kashin Koji, because we heard that Boruto and Kashin Koji were holed up in an Orochimaru abandoned hideout on the border of the Land of Wind. And upon sensing the massive chakra signature of the Moegi Shinju, Gaara and the New Age Sand siblings went to go meet that force. However, while we don't get to see this fight, this does speak to the massive power of even some of, as we would perceive them, the weaker Shinju. See, because obviously if you're talking about the strength of the Shinju, the Bug Shinju would be the weakest, but prior to the creation of the Shinki Shinju, you would assume that the Moegi Shinju would probably be the second weakest, and is still probably the second weakest now, even after the Shinki Shinju has been created. And yet the Moegi Shinju was able to overpower Gaara, who was undoubtedly the strongest Kage ruling right now. Not even just that, the Moegi Shinju was also able to overpower Gaara, Shinki, and the rest of the New Age Sand siblings simultaneously, to the point where Gaara, who has got as good battle sense as anybody, identified that it would be better to wrap up the New Age Sand siblings and send them into a retreat than for all four of them to battle against the Shinju simultaneously. And that's a scary thought, because it heavily limits the amount of people that are going to be even remotely relevant moving forward in Boruto. See, because if Gaara can't take out the Moegi Shinju, then you might as well write off literally every other Kage. And if you're writing off every other Kage, you should also write off every person below those Kage. Back to the moment, Moegi Shinju, looking just bad as hell, absolutely would, says, "By the way, about that wound, you're gonna need to do something about that, or are you gonna die? With how bad your current situation is, I genuinely don't think that you're in a position to be worried about the kids behind you." To which Gaara responds by saying, "That's why, in exchange for my life, I won't let their futures be extinguished." To which the Moegi Shinju responds by saying, "I'll put you out of your misery, and if you don't resist, even if I miss, at least the kids behind you will die." Now, in response to this, Gaara lifts up all of the sand eggs and begins to send them towards the entrance. And as we see the sand eggs fly away from Gaara, I believe it's revealed for the first time, but maybe not. Maybe I just wasn't looking at Gaara the first time we saw him in Boruto. But he's got a new sand gourd. And maybe I just forgot about Gaara's new sand gourd, but wow! Do I not like this one? It kind of looks like a giant bullhorn. I don't know, man. The other one was so iconic. And did it break? I don't think it broke. If I remember correctly, in the movie, he had a little miniature version of the one he used to carry. And I've never seen this one before, but maybe I have. Anyways, not a fan. But as the New Age Sand siblings are being sent away, the girl one screams, "Lord Kazekage!"
"Oh, Nick, you should know their names."
No, I shouldn't. I think one of their names is Yoda? One of them is Yoda? And as Gaara sends them away, he says, "I asked for this, for the future of the hidden sand." And it's at this point that we see that the Moegi Shinju is surrounded by modified claw grimes, all of whom look real hungry to get a big old bite of Kazekage. And as Shinki is being flown towards the entrance of Orochimaru's cave, he's able to stab his hand out of the sand egg and begin to bring iron sand towards him. He's then able to, with relative ease, use his iron sand to destroy the sand sand construct of his father because iron sand is stronger. It's always been conventionally accepted knowledge. That's why the third Kazekage was said to be the strongest Kazekage of all time. We then see Shinki, who, now that I'm looking at him, kind of looks like a dark Naruto. If you took away the eye things, he kind of looks like Menma. Anyways, we then see Shinki do the hand signs for a jutsu known as Iron Sand Sealing Palm. And right before Clawgrime is about to bite into Gaara's neck, he is encased in iron sand. And as he's being encased in iron sand, something he will not be able to get himself out of, he looks back at Shinki and screams, "Shinki, stop." But Shinki looks back at him and says, "You are necessary for the future of the hidden sand. We still need you." Now, in response to this loving father-son tit-for-tat, the Moegi Shinju says, "Oh, you're a bad child. You should have listened to your father." And immediately, Shinki is bitten by the nearest Clawgrime. And Yodo, yes, I was right about her name actually, screams Shinki, while the other one, whose name I'm not gonna learn anytime soon, says, "Stop, Yodo." We then watch as a Clawgrime begins to grow into a tree around Shinki. And while the tree grows around Shinki, he yells, "You guys need to go. Tell Konkuro about father." And as Yodo screams out to Shinki and is carried away by the other one, we see the final resting position of Shinki, which appears to be his hands poking out of a tree, maintaining the seal around Gaara. And when Shinki is fully absorbed into the tree, the sand doesn't disappear. And instead, we see Gaara in some form of stasis inside of this black iron ceiling of sand. And the Moegi Shinju trots on over to this black dome of iron sand and places her hand on it. And she realizes that Shinki will be able to maintain the ceiling so long as he is alive. And because being absorbed into a tree doesn't kill you, as your chakra is then siphoned off into a Shinju, if you are chosen to be made into a Shinju, so long as Shinki is inside this tree with his hands pointing at his father, the seal will be maintained. And it's this moment that the Moegi Shinju admits that Shinki has some nerve, that he risked his life to protect his father, and this makes the Moegi Shinju think that if Shinki were to join the ranks of the Shinju, then that would be rather interesting. And this, I believe, is supposed to be a somewhat subtle way of answering how the Shinju are created. See, because obviously it's been established that the Moegi Shinju is the creator of at least the soul thorn that Shinju are built around, and that somehow ties back into the tree that they made their hideout. And it probably has something to do with the big black box in the center of their hideout as well. However, one of the biggest question marks revolving around the Shinju is why all the people bitten by Clawgrimes haven't been turned into Shinju. And it appears as though, based off what we're seeing from this chapter, it's because the Shinju have to be purposely selected by the Moegi Shinju. That or they have to fall into a specific power level, but Bug got turned into a Shinju. And Bug's literally just a guy. Now, as to why the Moegi Shinju decided that Bug would be a cool Shinju to have, I can't say. But it appears as though that the absolute nobodies who are bitten in the center of Konoha trying to protect Sarada aren't going to be turning into Shinju anytime soon because Moegi probably doesn't find them interesting. Anyways, we then cut back to Konoha as Konkuro's giving exposition to Shikamaru about what the hidden sand knows about the Shinju. So Konkuro tells Shikamaru, according to the report from our detached forces, Shinki, who was turned into a tree, appears to still be alive. And thanks to the sealing technique that he used on Gaara, Gaara, who was on the verge of death, is also still alive. However, though, as it currently stands, there's no way to save either of them. The only person who's able to break the sealing technique of Shinki is Shinki. And I find this interesting, because are we saying that the sealing technique of Shinki is so incredibly powerful that literally nobody else could break it? I mean, that would be like an Uzumaki level Fuinjutsu. And obviously Magnet Release has worked hand in hand with Fuinjutsu for basically the entire time it's existed, and the Iron Sand is supposed to be the strongest version of Magnet Release. But who's to say that somebody with a chakra absorption ability like Delta or Kawaki couldn't just be like suck, 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 and then just take the sealing jutsu off Gaara? Maybe that's too simple or something, or maybe I'm just undervaluing Shinki, but his idea that the sealing jutsu is so incredibly complete in a world filled with cyborgs and Otsutskis that nobody else can break it is kind of crazy. Konkuro goes on to say, I want to find a way to return Shinki back to his original state and save Gaara's life. Shikamaru, is there any way you know how to do either of those things? Now, to this point, the Shikamaru, who, mind you, is talking to his brother-in-law, says, Konkuro, let me ask you one thing. After the incident, did anybody with the same chakra signature as Shinki appear? To which Konkuro responds by saying, no, there have been no reports. To which Shikamaru responds by saying, okay, well, that's good, kind of. Shikamaru goes on to tell Konkuro, listen, so far as symptoms of the tree, we're still investigating. We don't have all the answers. We have a pretty good inkling that if you destroy the Shinju, you get the person made from the Shinju back, but we don't really have all the answers. But as soon as we do, we'll let you know. Now, to this point, the Konkuro lets Shikamaru know that when it comes to helping in the investigation, he and the Hidden Sand will not be much help, as the Hidden Sand are going to be buckling down on their own defenses to make sure they don't get wiped out by the Shinju. Which, like, fair. Like I just established, the strongest Kage in Boruto just got pretty easily defeated by one of the weaker Shinju. And all Shikamaru can really say in response to Kankuro here is, I understand. Now Sarada, who at this point should probably just move into the Hokage's office, looks at Shikamaru after he hangs up the phone call from Kankuro and says, no way. Their numbers increased. Those guys were our allies, which is essentially her saying there's no way there could be more Shinju, and the more Shinju are coming from the people that are helping us fight against the Shinju. Kind of like the zombie apocalypse problem. You can kill a couple, but if you get bit, well, you're in their ranks. And Shikamaru, who's the king of being like, I don't know, we're still trying to figure this stuff out, says, yeah, I don't know, Sarada, we gotta take that into consideration, but we have no answers for sure. He then tells Sarada and Sumire, but I believe he knows that Kashin Koji is listening in. Listen, guys, when Boruto comes into contact, tell him that I need to speak to him. It's nothing serious. I just need information. And it's this point that we see that there's a toad under Shikamaru's desk. And like, not a small toad, like a very noticeably sized toad. Like he's a ninja. You think he doesn't notice the toad by his foot? Anyways, we cut back to Ryu, who, like all the other Shinju, dripped the hell out. And Ryu is talking to Jura. And he says, Ryu, is that my name? Which Jura responds by saying, that's right. I gave it to you. It's necessary information for the baseline of what will become your personality. And Ryu out loud says, Ryu, I quite like my name. You must understand me well. And it's at this point that the Moegi Shinju, you know what? If she's going to be an important character in this story, I'm looking up her name. So Moegi Shinju name. Let's see here. Matsuri. Matsuri goes, what kind of guy is this? I think she's confused by the thing she made. I'm not learning the bug Shinju's name. You can't make me do that. While Matsuri is pondering what kind of guy Ryu is, Ryu says, wait a minute. And it's at this point that it's revealed what specific ability Ryu has. And that ability appears to be Iron Sand control. However, we can't necessarily confirm as to whether or not it's Iron Sand. All we know is that it kind of looks like Iron Sand and it grows off of Ryu's shoulder. Considering the fact that all of the Shinju's clothing are kind of some extension of the claw marks, it might just be the ability to control his clothing. But it's probably the Iron Sand, or at least something so akin to it that'll be used in the exact same way. Ryu then uses this, we're gonna call it Iron Sand, extension from his shoulder to reach down into the black box. Because within the black box, there appears to be an eyeball. And thus Ryu plunges his black sand into the box and grabs whoever that eyeball belongs to, and lo and behold, it's Code. And Code is just immediately defenseless against a Shinju that was made a minute ago, as he kicks his little feet and says, let me go. Now Ryu, who's holding Code by the neck with his Iron Sand, says, what is this thing? It was just sneaking around. Jura responds by saying, don't worry about him. He's Code. We kind of owe him a debt of gratitude because he sort of created us. And Ryu lets him go, at which point Jura physically looks down at him and says, what are you doing here? Are you of any use to us? At which point Code, rather indignantly, there we go, says, what do you mean, do I have any business here? That's a hard word, indignantly. What do you all intend to do? What happened to eating Otsutsuki? To which Jura rather calmly responds by saying, well, listen, while we do intend on eating the Otsutsuki at some point, right now we got like a lot going on, like Christmas is right around the corner. I don't know what Matsuri wants. We just got this new guy, we're trying to read him. Maybe he likes books, I like books. But for the moment, we're deliberately putting off the matter with the Otsutsuki. But you have a grudge against Boruto, right? Well, he's actually one of the things we're trying to do before we eat an Otsutsuki. We just want to kill him. So if you want him dead, I mean, we want him dead, so you go kill him. And then we'll use Kawaki to make a divine tree, and then bing, bang, boom. Job done. Now, Code doesn't necessarily like being bossed around because Jura did just tell him to essentially shoo and go do that thing you were talking about doing. And thus Code looks up at Jura and says, what makes you so arrogant to assume you get to decide your fate on your own? And what makes you think you can boss me around? It's up to me who I decide to kill. You monsters should just focus on eating the Otsutsuki. And don't forget this, the one who's going to eat the chakra fruit produced by the trees you make is me. Now, to this point, the Jura does something that I don't believe we've ever seen him do before, which is he appears to close one of his eyes like he's about to fire a tailed beast bomb, but instead some kind of bubbly, fuzzy thing appears in front of his face. And it appears as though Jura is accessing some library of information inside of his own mind, because upon closing his eye and activating this ability, he says, oh, chakra fruits. They contain dense energy and a mass of the genetic information of all living beings on the planet. What would even happen if we were to consume one of those? Now, mind you, Code also told them that he wants to eat the chakra fruit to continue on with Ishiki's will. Simp. Now, it's this point that we cut to Matsuri, the bug Shinju, and Tidari, because they could all be legitimate candidates for receiving this chakra fruit. But in response to Jura's question about what would happen if the Shinju were to consume the chakra fruit, Code says, before me? Well, in short, you even asking that question is your declaration of intent to do exactly that. And thus, you are my enemy. And thus, Code throws 2 claw marks on the ground and plunges his hand into them. And since the clothing of all of the Shinju is made from claw marks material, Code's hand shoots out of Jura's chest. However, Jura nonchalantly looks down with one eye and immediately shoots Code's hand off. Now, mind you, Code's ability allows him to transport parts of his body or his entire body through the claw marks, but it is his real body. So much like with Robin and her Hana Hana no Mi, any injuries sustained to the body parts sent through these claw grimes are injuries sustained to Code's physical body. And thus Jura, without taking his hands out of his pockets, mind you, shoots Code's hand clean off. And I'm gonna walk you very quickly through how simply insane that feat is. Code's limiters are removed, which means that Code should hypothetically be stronger than Jigen. Now, Jigen and Ishiki are not equal, but Jigen was stronger while amped through the power of the Ten Tails than Naruto and Sasuke combined. Now, it's long been established that Boruto is leagues stronger than Code, but Jura is hands in the pockets, making you wipe with your left hand for the rest of your life, leagues stronger than Code. They're not playing the same sport, which means that Code, who as it stands right now would probably stand a legitimate threat against peak power Naruto and Sasuke simultaneously, couldn't touch Jura if there were 3 of him. That's insane. We then see as Code's right hand falls to the ground as it's revealed that not only did Jura have his hands in his pockets, he's leaped up against a wall with his feet crossed. That is the least threatened a being has ever been. Code then realizes that he's gonna have to learn to throw with his left hand and lets out a massive yell. It's at this point that Jura says, I'm thankful to you, Code. You gave us the freedom to think. Thanks to you, I'm able to enjoy exciting days every day. But it seems like your life is missing a little bit of excitement. I mean, here you are peeping on us. Therefore, with respect to the man who created me, I'm gonna give you an assignment. Boruto and the unknown guy who's aligned with him. I want you to find and kill them. And in exchange for the death of Boruto and his unknown ally, which confirms, mind you, that the Shinju don't know who Kashin Koji is, I promise that when a chakra fruit is made, we'll give it to you. So what do you think, buddy? Now that all interest in color has faded from your life, why don't we spice things up a little bit? Code then decides to tourniquet his arm in the most Code way possible by just slapping a bunch of claw marks over it. I guess works. It's kind of like a chakra bandage. Like he could have just like cauterized it or used medical ninjutsu. In fact, grab your hand. We can probably reattach that. And Code is just sitting there pondering on what Jura just offered him while he seethes with pain, while the bug Shinju kind of just stares at him and laughs to himself, wondering why watching Code suffer fills him with so much joy. And like, I'm gonna say it right now. Ikimoto kind of hates the villains he created in part 1 of this story, because he's just taken Code and Kawaki by the scruff of their necks for 15 chapters and dragged them through thorn bushes. Now, Code's not happy about the fact that Bug is happy, as he scowls at him and says, "You're making fun of me, you bastard." But he looks at Jura and says, "There's no reason for you to tell me. I'll do it. I'll kill Boruto and all of his friends. This is a contract. Don't forget that I'll get the chakra fruit no matter what. You will give it up." To which Jura responds by saying, "Yay, go, you know what, you go do it. You one-armed, now Paralympic candidate. I'm looking forward to what you do out there, you now half-speed typer. Where will your destiny lead you?" But as Code slinks down into the claw marks that he left on the floor when he tried to attack Jura, he says, "You may be laughing now, but I'll be the one laughing in the end." Now this makes Ryu say, when Code is gone, he's a nasty bastard. Next time I see him, can I kill him? To which Jura responds by saying, "Of course, that's your freedom. But for the moment, we should talk about something else. Who in your heart do you want to devour?" Well, what he actually says is that we needed to discuss something else, and that something else is instincts, and what are your instincts telling you you need to do? To which Ryu rather nonchalantly answers by saying, "Well, it's already been decided. Right now, that guy is sealed with a special technique, but that special special technique can be destroyed. And therefore, the person I want to devour is the 5th Kazekage, Gaara of the Sand. Which, we all could have seen coming, right? Makes sense. I mean, Shinki's literally Gaara's son. Well, like legally, he's Gaara's son. Gaara's a virgin. But you didn't hear that from me. You heard it from his light novel. But anyways, we smash cut back to Konoha and the Hidden Stone Faces, where we see that Boruto is sitting on the head of his father. And all but immediately, he is joined by none other than Kawaki. Now, Kawaki stands a couple of feet away from Boruto, hands in pocket, with no real intention to jump him, probably because he knows if he did, it wouldn't go super well for him. Now, Boruto asks him, "Are you alone?" To which Kawaki says yes, but Ada's probably watching. Now, Boruto gives it a second and then says, "What's wrong? Why aren't you attacking me?" At which point Kawaki doesn't really answer his question and answers his question with another question, asking, "What are you trying to do, Boruto? Those guys from Konoha, the ones who were interrogating you, why haven't you told them the truth?" To which Boruto responds by saying, "It won't lead to anything good." See, because no matter what the objective truth is, some will believe the story that I tell, while others will doubt it. And this will split people into two camps, those who believe I killed the Hokage and those who believe I didn't. And since Boruto is trying to protect Konoha as much as possible, the least amount of division in Konoha possible is what he wants. And this ironically ties Boruto directly back to Itachi. The last time there was major division in Konoha, the great unifying force was actually the hatred towards Itachi. Now, unfortunately, that unity had to come from Itachi wiping out the smaller divisive force of the Uchiha. But in this sense, Boruto is taking the entirety of the ire of Konoha onto himself to make sure that Konoha is unified. And ironically, this is also exactly what Danzo was trying to achieve when he leaked the information that Naruto was the Jinchuriki of Kurama to the entire village, to make the entire village unified in their hatred of a baby. Boruto goes on to say that at least now Konoha is functioning normally, and that's fine. Now, of course, I have to deal with the fact that everybody hates me and everybody's trying to kill me, but I can survive. And that's mostly due to the fact that regardless of what has happened, I've acquired a new form of strength from my master, Sasuke, somebody who's definitely been hated by an entire village before. Kawaki continues with his 20 questions by asking what happened with Momoshiki. Not like that's all been resolved, right? I mean, from what I saw, when our karmas resonated, you couldn't even control it. And it's at this point that Boruto begins to give us the answers that we've been asking for since chapter 9, when Boruto and Kawaki's karmas began to resonate, and Boruto had to disappear and slowly but surely pull his karma back in. Now, what we theorize at that moment is that Boruto, over the course of the time skip, lost control of his karma marking, and that's basically what happened, but let me have Boruto explain it to you. See, Boruto goes on to say that about 2 years, when I fought against Code with Sasuke, I used the karma for the first time since leaving the village. And since it had been about a year, that was the longest that Boruto had ever gone without using his karma. However, in that moment that Boruto tried to use his karma marking after a year of not using it, he felt the sensation of being taken over by Momoshiki, or at least something close to it. See, Boruto continues on by saying, I was no longer myself. I felt the sensation of death while maintaining consciousness. And ever since that moment, I have not once again used my karma marking. Now, this has intrigued or possibly enraged Kawaki. As he said, what's going on? Why would any of that happen? Boruto doesn't understand himself, and he tells Kawaki that Momoshiki's been quiet for 3 years. That is to say that Momoshiki's been quiet ever since his efforts to take over Boruto's body were thwarted after the firing of Omnipotence. But Boruto fears that the activation of his karma marking could serve as the catalyst for Momoshiki reawakening. And this aggravates Kawaki, because Kawaki's entire mission in life is to make sure that Momoshiki is dead. And thus Kawaki says, so it seems as though your control of the karma is getting worse, and so I'm more justified in my want to eliminate you as an entity. But Boruto then takes his stab at redirecting the conversation, as he says, look, either way, you have to become stronger. And this is the page that was leaked by the official Boruto team. You're my dad's disciple, right? You're supposed to free dad from his seal, which is in the Daikoku-ten. Now, essentially what Boruto is saying here is that Kawaki's the only person who can free Hinata and Naruto from the Daikoku-ten, and therefore Kawaki has to gain a certain amount of power and eliminate all the Otsutsuki like he wants to, so that Naruto can be free. Boruto continues on by saying, ideally it'd be best if you could get direct training. However, the idea of direct training is not feasible right now, because it would take too much time, and Kawaki needs to get stronger immediately. And thus Boruto says to Kawaki, I'm gonna tell you a conclusion that you would eventually come to on your own, and therefore if the outcome is all the same, it would be best to do it swiftly. And this confuses Kawaki as he asks Boruto what the hell he's talking about. Now, to this point that I theorized a couple of days ago, the video came out, I guess 2 days ago now as of the releasing of this video, that Boruto was going to tell Kawaki about a Shinjutsu, an awakening to an existing jutsu, or just a new jutsu that Kawaki was going to awaken in the future based off the 10 paths projection that Kashin Koji had seen. Much in the same way that Boruto was able to learn Rasengan Uzuhiko because Kashin Koji told him about how he was able to use it in the future. And to me, at that time, that seemed like the safest assumption to make. But I was wrong. Kind of. See, because while the through line to me identifying a couple of weeks ago that Kawaki needed to get stronger through no effort of his own does still stand true here, Kawaki's not awakening to a Shinjutsu, at least not now. See, because what Boruto is revealing to Kawaki is not a new jutsu or even a Shinjutsu, but rather that Amado has been limiting Kawaki's strength. More specifically, Boruto tells Kawaki to confront Amado and tells him that he's hiding it. Your true power. Boruto goes on to say that your attack capability power has a limiter on it, much like how Code had a limiter placed on him. But not only does your attack capability have a limiter on it, but also your defense capability and your regeneration capability. Amado has adjusted all of your abilities to fit within a certain parameter, and this absolutely baffles Kawaki. As Kawaki is dumbfounded by the news that he's hearing, we pan in on his right eye, and we see that Kawaki's right eye is projecting an image directly to Amado's laboratory, as Amado is watching this very conversation. And over the TV, we hear Kawaki say, "That old man, why would he augment my power levels? Because it would be a problem if I died?" Now, to this point that we see Amado also in relative disbelief, as he says, "Boruto, where did you get that information?" And it's this point that Amado remembers Kawaki grabbing the toad off of Boruto, which he was watching, because we now know he has a camera of sorts in Kawaki's right eye. And as Amado remembers this moment, as Kawaki squeezed the toad and the toad erupted like a summoned toad would, Amado begins to ponder about whether this toad was from Mount Muabuko or one of the toads he made for Kashin Koji. But Amado, as he sits there smoking his cigarette, has a hard time believing that Kashin Koji could still be alive. I mean, after all, Kashin Koji was made specifically to die. He had to fight against Ishiki, and therefore Amado starts to do calculations in his head saying, if he's alive, what can I do now? And what's his purpose now that he's lived up to his purpose in the killing of Jigen and the awakening of Ishiki? That is to say that Amado doesn't know what his creation is up to, and that scares him. Boruto continues on by saying that Amado needs your karma for his purposes. So he was tinkering with your abilities to make sure that you wouldn't die no matter what. Now, this is where the chapter begins to lose me a little bit. See, obviously, Amado does need Kawaki's karma marking, because without Kawaki's karma marking, he doesn't have the ability to possibly imprint Akebi's DNA, personality, and chakra into somebody else through Kawaki. So if Kawaki dies, then Amado's hope of getting Akebi back also die. But where the chapter begins to lose me is the fact that why would Amado suppress the power of Kawaki if he wants Kawaki to survive? Wouldn't the strongest possible version of Kawaki stand the best chance at surviving? Or are we keeping Kawaki weak specifically so the Shinju don't identify him as a threat, and therefore they never take the effort to kill him? Boruto goes on to say that if you think it's a lie, make Amado spit it out himself. I'm leaving now. Now, to this point, that Kawaki tells Boruto that his thoughts haven't changed at all, reaffirming that the Otsutsuki are the root of all evil and therefore must be destroyed. After all, it is the Otsutsuki who are responsible for the abnormality of the Shinju existing in the first place. That's why they all need to disappear. You and me included. But before we do that, we do need to get rid of the Shinju. They're multiplying. And thus Kawaki tells Boruto, I don't care what I have to do. I'll even team up with you. Soon enough, I'll catch up with you. And together, if necessary, we will take out the Shinju. But Boruto looks back at him and says, well, you better not hold me back, bro. To which Kawaki rather simply responds with, you bastard. Now, this was a great chapter, and as the editor note on the final page of this chapter is, with the Shinju in sight, the two finally join forces, and how will Konoha react to the sand predicament, means that most likely heading forward in the manga, we are going to see Kawaki and Boruto fighting side by side. I also believe that the setting of Boruto will probably shift to the hidden sand for at least a little bit, but we are in a rather interesting dead space for the manga right now. I don't mean like plot or intrigue wise, as in like, what would happen in the next chapter? I have genuinely no idea. Most likely, I'm assuming that the next chapter is going to revolve around Ryu and his desire to try and consume Gaara, and thus, most likely, the main fighting force of Konoha is going to have to enter the Team Boruto trust tree because Gaara is sealed in Orochimaru's cave, where Kashin, Koji, and Boruto were at least staying at one time. On top of this, I believe that chapter 16 will see Kawaki confronting Amado. But why is Amado trying to keep Kawaki weak? Was it under the orders of Jigen? Is he trying to make Kawaki non-intimidating? Or is he trying to make sure that Kawaki can be overpowered by other forces? Well, we're going to be answering all those questions and a whole lot more in our next video, so make sure you like this video, subscribe to the page, and ding, 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 ding that noti bell. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think about the development that Kawaki's powers have been stifled by Amado? Do you agree with it narratively as a choice? Do you think it's a proper character development move for him? Tell me in the comments below. And while you're at it, for me, like the video. I actually literally just told you to do all of that like 30 seconds ago. Okay, I'm gonna do the joke I do at the end of every video now. I guess this could be the joke.